Ever walk into a museum and think, wow, I wasn't expecting this? Well, that's kind of the vibe we're going for today as we check out some seriously fascinating and, let's be honest, kind of quirky museums across America.
It's like a cross-country road trip, but instead of those cheesy souvenirs, we're bringing back some serious food for thought.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this journey, we're tapping into Undiscovered America TV, a show that's all about, well, uncovering the unexpected.
What I find so intriguing about museums, especially these ones, is how they connect things you'd never think went together. Like they make you rethink history, art, even a simple potato.
Okay, so picture this. We're in Vegas,
Yeah.
right? But forget the casinos for a sec. Instead, we're in a graveyard.
Not a real graveyard, right?
No, not for people at least. This is the Neon Museum, and it's a graveyard for old neon signs.
Oh, right, the neon boneyard. It's kind of a poetic concept when you think about it.
Totally. You've got these giant, iconic signs from old casinos and motels, each one a little piece of Vegas history just waiting to be rediscovered. They even have a show called Brilliant, where they light up the signs with music and archival footage. It's wild.
I can imagine. So you've got these physical remnants of a city that's constantly changing, tearing down the old to make way for the new. It makes you wonder, how does a place like Vegas view its own history?
Right. Like, do those neon signs become more or less meaningful as time goes on and people forget the places they represent?
It's like how those ancient ruins we see, they kind of gain importance as time passes.
That's a really interesting connection. And speaking of connections, it actually reminds me of our next stop, Roswell, New Mexico.
Home of the International UFO Museum and Research Center. Talk about a place where history gets a little blurry.
Tell me about it. We're talking about UFOs, alien encounters, the whole nine yards. And Dennis Balzer, one of the researchers at the museum, he brought up a really interesting point.
What's that?
He said that as the people who were actually there in Roswell back in 1947, as they pass away, we lose a bit of that living history. Those firsthand accounts, even if you don't buy into the whole alien thing, they still matter. The museum has this collection of over 600 witness testimonies. It's pretty remarkable.
It makes you think, how much of history relies on people's memories and what happens when those memories are gone?
Big questions. So we've got these two museums, both in the desert, both grappling with the past, but in totally different ways. One's got these tangible pieces of a city that's always evolving. The other's got the memories and mysteries of an event that still has people talking. Makes you wonder what other unexpected connections we might find.
Speaking of unexpected, our next stop takes us to San Francisco. It's known for its iconic Golden Gate Bridge and those beautiful Victorian houses. But did you know it's also home to a hidden gem for cartoon and comic book lovers?
You're talking about the Cartoon Art Museum, right? Seriously, who knew there was a whole museum dedicated to that stuff?
It often surprises people. But cartoons, as lighthearted as they seem, they have a pretty fascinating history, and they actually say a lot about our culture.
Totally. And the museum's collection is really diverse, with everything from early 20th century comic strips like The Yellow Kid, which, fun fact, was created right there in San Francisco, to original cells from those classic Disney movies.
I'm more of a Looney Tunes guy myself. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, that's my jam.
Well, get this. Summerlee Casher, the museum's executive director, told us that those early Disney cells are actually super rare because apparently Walt Disney was a bit of a penny pincher. He'd have them reuse the cells to save money.
Wow, so that's why they're so hard to come by. Who knew being frugal could make you a collector's item?
Right. It goes to show that sometimes the most valuable things aren't the ones we expect. Now get ready for a complete 180 as we head to Blackfoot, Idaho. The potato capital of the world.
Wait, seriously, a whole museum dedicated to potatoes? You've got to be kidding me.
I'm dead serious. You got to hand it to them. They fully embrace the potato thing. They've got a whole museum set up in an old railroad depot, a giant baked potato statue that's basically begging for a selfie, and even the world's largest potato chip.
Okay, that's actually pretty impressive, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just, well, potatoes, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Idaho Potato Museum isn't just some shrine to spuds. They really dive deep into the potato's role in Idaho's history and its economy.
I never thought about it, but I guess the potato is a pretty big deal in Idaho.
Huge. The museum teaches you about the science behind potatoes, the challenges of growing them, and how important they are for feeding the world.
Wow, I'm learning so much already. Who knew a museum about potatoes could be so interesting?
It just goes to show that sometimes the most ordinary things have the most extraordinary stories to tell. We've been talking about unexpected heroes, right? Well, our next stop is dedicated to a food that's, let's face it, often the butt of the joke. Spam! You got it. The Spam Museum in Austin, Minnesota.
I've heard of it. It's kind of amazing how a brand like Spam, even with all the jokes, has managed to stick around.
Right. And the museum totally owns it. They've got exhibits about how Spam was actually a big deal during World War II, how it's used in all sorts of cuisines around the globe, Spam musubi, anyone. And of course, they've got a whole section on Spam in pop culture.
Okay, that's pretty smart. By kind of acknowledging the elephant in the room, they can actually have a more serious conversation about Spam and its place in history.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, look, we get it. Spam might not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's a whole story here. And honestly, it's a pretty fascinating story. I mean, who knew Spam was practically a lifeline for soldiers during the war? Or that it's used in so many different ways around the world?
It really shows how food can adapt and change as it moves across cultures. I mean, think about it. Spam, this little can of meat from the Midwest, has found a home in dishes from Korea to Hawaii. That's pretty wild.
It's a good reminder that food isn't just about, eating. It's about history, culture, even globalization. And speaking of things that make you think, our next stop is a museum that really challenges our ideas about art itself.
The Museum of Bad Art.
You nailed it. MOBA. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about what makes art good or bad.
I've always been curious about that place. It's like they celebrate the stuff that most galleries would probably toss in the trash.
That's the point. It's
Yeah.
in this basement in Dedham, Massachusetts, and it's all about finding the beauty, I guess, in art that's a little rough around the edges,
I kind of love that. It makes art more approachable, less stuffy.
Totally. And Louise Relly-Sacco, the director, she's got this amazing title, Permanent Acting Interim Executive Director.
Catchy.
Right. But anyway, she's super passionate about the art they showcase. She says it's not about being technically perfect, it's about the artist's intention. Like, even if a piece is a little wonky, there's still something genuine there.
It's more about the feeling, the attempt to express something, even if it doesn't turn out the way a traditional artist might do it. Makes you wonder, who gets to decide what's good art anyway?
And that's what MOBA wants you to think about. They're not giving you answers. They're starting conversations, challenging perspectives. In a world that's so focused on being perfect, it's kind of refreshing to see a place that celebrates the not so perfect. It's funny. We've been all over the map, right? From those flashy neon signs to, art that's so bad it's good.
And don't forget those potatoes.
Oh, right. How can I forget?
Yeah.
But it strikes me that all these museums, they kind of have a common thread. They're all about finding the unexpected, the hidden gems that make you stop and think.
It's about keeping an open mind, right? Like appreciating things you might not expect to find in a museum.
Exactly. And speaking of unexpected, we're ending our little adventure with a place that's dedicated to a food that doesn't always get the respect it deserves.
Wait a minute, are we going back to the Idaho Potato Museum?
You know it. We've come full circle, my friend, from Vegas to the potato fields of Idaho. But seriously, don't let the whole potato theme throw you off. This museum is actually pretty cool. They go all in on the history of the potato, how it shaped Idaho, its economy, even its identity.
Okay, now I'm kind of curious, like what kind of history are we talking about here?
They've got exhibits on everything. You'll learn about the science behind growing potatoes, how they're processed chips, fries, even those instant mashed potatoes we all secretly love.
Don't tell anyone, but I'm a huge fan of those instant mashed potatoes.
Me too. But yeah, and of course they talk about what the potato means to the people of Idaho.
It sounds like they really cover it all. It's amazing how much thought they put into something we usually just, take for granted.
Right. I mean, where else are you going to find a giant baked potato statue just begging for a selfie? But seriously, beyond all the fun stuff, the Idaho Potato Museum really makes you realize that there's often a bigger story behind the things we see every day.
It's like, don't judge a museum by its potato.
Exactly. So there you have it. We've traveled from the bright lights of Vegas to those amazing neon signs, explored the mysteries of Roswell, checked out some seriously cool cartoons, questioned our ideas about art, and ended up paying homage to the mighty potato.
It's been a wild ride. Who knew learning could be so much fun?
That's what we're all about. Remember, folks, the world's full of surprises. You just got to keep your eyes open, and don't be afraid to explore the unexpected. And hey, if you stumble across any quirky museums on your travels, be sure to let us know. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and remember, keep on exploring.